one of the reasons that their leader, Warren Jeffs, is in prison today is for marrying underage girls. I believe he married a 12-year-old.
Whoa. Hold up.
Yeah,
Wait, so the leader of your religious community is now in jail for marrying a 12-year-old?
That's one of the reasons. Yes. Yep.
Wait, how did that even happen? And how did the parents were okay with this? Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Introspect Club, a club where you can learn a lot about yourself through conversations with other people. My name is Jeff Damisse, and I'll be your host. Today we have a very, very interesting conversation, as we do every week. This show, we like to bring unique individuals who have very unique lifestyles and experiences and bring it to the world so you guys can learn from it, because it's always good to learn from a different perspective, because yours might not be the only one worth listening to. Sorry. We're going to be talking about the subject of polygamy. Now, there are communities and individuals that do not believe or practice in the world of monogamy. Not necessarily they're doing it, unethically. It's something that everybody in that community agrees to do, and it could happen in so many different forms. It could be happening for different reasons. I know there are times when I've questioned even the idea of monogamy for a lot of reasons. But I've, come to the conclusion that monogamy is for me because of my lifestyle and what works for me. But at the same time, I've had moments where when you're single and you're dating, technically you're kind of in an open relationship until you decide that you're not, right? Because you are seeing other people and so on and so forth. But when you're talking about polygamy, I want to speak about it a little bit more eloquently, and I don't want to misquote the community. So I brought somebody along who grew up in the lifestyle of polygamy and had quite the journey in and out of it. So I want to bring in a very special guest. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for your very own Sam Zitting Wison. What's going on? What's up, man?
Doing well. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you for joining the show. You look like you're in a cave or a castle in the background. I don't know what's going on. I feel like some demon's going to come and attack you or something.
Yeah, it could be a backdrop or it could be a dungeon. I'll never tell.
That's the thing about Zoom now. When people are doing these Zoom calls, every time I see the backgrounds people choose, it always seems like, I don't know if they put a lot of thought into it or they just had a last minute thing, because sometimes it could be really nice or really goofy. Was this a thought out thing? What is this?
This is actually a backdrop on the wall behind me.
This is an actual wall.
An actual wall.
Okay.
Yeah.
You see how dumb I am? You see what just happened? I've been doing so many Zoom calls. I'm like, hey, he's using a Zoom background. No, that's his family in the background. That's his actual family.
In your defense, though, it happens a lot. So.
Okay. All right. Note to self. That means I don't feel like an idiot anymore. So I want to talk about polygamy, right? And you grew up in that environment. But before we talk about your story, I want to make sure everybody understands what it means to be polygamous or in the world of polygamy. Can you please describe or define in your own definition what polygamy is?
Yes, so polygamy is a marriage between a husband and more than one wife. So it's could be 2 wives, could be up to 80 wives, But
okay.
It's a one husband and multiple wives. That's the easiest definition I can think of.
So, and what is it when it's like, which is not talked about enough, but I know those communities exist where it's one wife and multiple husbands.
See, I know nothing about that. I don't know anything about those communities. As far as my knowledge goes, it's all been brought up in polygamy in the sense of one husband and multiple wives.
Now, does it always have to be marriage in the community that you have been involved in? Or is it also like just a lifestyle that doesn't necessarily include marriage?
So I've heard of both, but for my community, it was all marriage, but not technically legal marriage. So a lot of the marriages were done within the church. So they were, I guess you could say, spiritual marriages, that type of thing. But It was done through the church, but not necessarily legally done through the state or the country.
So, okay. So this is a good segue into like tell me about the community you grew up in and how polygamy played a part in that community.
Sure. So I grew up, it is a polygamous group currently run by a prophet named Warren Jeffs. The religious group is called the FLDS, it's Fundamentalist Latter-day Saints. And the majority of them have lived throughout the years in southern Utah and on the border of southern Utah and Arizona. And the place is very well known as either Colorado City and Hilldale, or also known as Short Creek. So that's the group that I was raised in and kind of lived in for the first 18 years of my life. And as far as polygamy goes, it was a huge part of the culture and the community. Not everyone there had more than one wife. Not every man there had more than one wife. And there were even several men that never got married. Every marriage out there was arranged by the prophet. So the men out there couldn't decide who they were going to marry, and the women couldn't decide who they were going to marry. It was all decided by the leaders of the church.
But let me ask you a question, right? So if in this polygamous community, which is fundamentalist Latter-day Saints, right? So if the idea was to have multiple wives and it was all assigned to you to some degree, right? Wouldn't you run out of wives?
You're not the first person to ask that question.
I better not be the first person to ask that question.
That's one of the most popular questions I get.
Okay.
And the answer is unfortunate because, of course, that is an issue. But over the years, there have been many of the men that have been what we call kicked out or asked or forced to leave the community. And they would use the excuse that these men did something they shouldn't have done. And they were sent away to repent of whatever it is they did. In a lot of cases, they didn't even know what they did, but they were sent away to repent before they could return. A lot of these men never actually were able to return to the community. But for those of them that did return, a lot of them never were able to remarry or to be a part of their wife's life after that.
So was this like the ultimate boys club, if I'm allowed to say that? Because like you're basically saying we get to have all these women, and if we don't like you, leave. The women stay, and we get to keep all these women in large sums. So that way we get to hog them up and less, men to allocate to these women. So we have to spread them across these smaller group of men. Do you feel like that's kind of like what happened or no?
Well, from the outside looking in, that's what it looks like. Mm-hmm. But living in it and being raised in it, it felt very much directed from God and very much all a part of a bigger plan that we couldn't all fully understand. And it was very serious and very important. And someone getting kicked out of the community was not something that we sat around and joked about, thought was funny. It was something that was very serious.
Yeah.
These men were forced to leave their wives and their children behind.
Their wives? So they had wives and they were asked to leave.
Exactly.
So yes. What happened to their wives when they left?
In some cases, they were remarried to other men out there.
That's crazy. Hold up. Wait. So these are women that also had kids with the original husband that got exiled, and she was asked, forced, or volunteered to marry again. Which was it?
Well, because they so fully believed that the leader of the church out there was speaking for God, they did it because that's what he asked them to do, and they did it willingly because they really didn't think that they had any choice in the matter. They assumed that this direction was not coming from this man. They assumed this direction was coming directly from God because he claims to be a prophet and speak to God. So, it's definitely messing with people's lives, and it's been very, very difficult. Some of the things people have had to go through, but in the end, you would have to live in their shoes to understand why they went along with it. It was very, very important to them to follow this man.
So basically, these leaders seem to have a lot more control over the community that they were guiding, right?
Yes.
How do you become an elder? Is that what they're called?
Well, no, elder is just a title within the actual organization, but the leaders are called prophets or apostles or
how do you become one? How do you get like the invitation to Willy Wonka's wife factory?
No, it's not. Generally, these men work their way up the ranks. They start out with smaller callings within the church, and then over the years, they're able to, work up depending on their worthiness and all of that. But
worthiness?
A lot also has to do with, for example, Warren Jeffs. The prophet before him was his father.
Okay.
So, so he was kind of already in it because his father was in it.
So it was very incestuous. Like it was like mostly a lot of nepotism and like friends brushing shoulders.
They did become good friends, and yes, they were very close as leaders of the church. But there was no really rhyme or reason for the group that I was raised in. When one prophet died, one man would stand up and say, "Hey, I was told that I should be the next prophet." And so
I was told that's all it took.
Well, in some cases, there were more than one man that claimed that title. So in some cases, the community would, in a sense, split up, so some would go with follow one man and some would follow another man because they believed that man was the one that had the actual authority to do what they were doing and claim themselves to be the next prophet. So
what happened after that? Did they kill each other off for the rights to be the prophet? Like, what's going on? How do you have multiple prophets? I don't know the community, but I'm imagining if two people are saying they're the prophet and they're the leader, there's got to be some animosity there, no?
Well, I'm sure there was. I never was that involved in what was going on behind closed doors between the leaders and all of that. But as far as I know, there was never any actual killing. It was just very, I guess, frustrating. And some people would follow one and some would follow another. So how did the women feel about this arrangement, right? Because you're talking about a community of religious men who were dictating who these women would mate with, right? Mm-hmm. And the majority of the women are in, I guess, situations where they are marrying a man who also has multiple wives already, and she would share that man and share that household with other women. How did the women actually respond to this? Well, there were definitely some, I guess, it wasn't always easy. I'll say that. It was definitely a very difficult thing for some of these women, but for the most part, they were okay with it, I guess you could say, because that's the way they were raised. That's all they knew. From the time they were little girls and little babies, basically, they were being told that this polygamy, or what they would call it, the celestial law, they would call it the celestial law. They were taught about this and the importance of it and how amazing it was that you could be a part of such a thing. And even their own moms would be teaching them these things because that's what their moms taught them, and on and on and on and on. So it's one of those things where if you're raised in it, it doesn't it's not so difficult as what we would consider it, or what someone from the outside would look in and consider it.
I mean, that makes sense, because I can imagine there are a lot of things we're taught today that is so normal to the masses that I guess the future version of us is going to look at us like, are you guys insane? Like,
how are you okay with that? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And even the thing, like, if you think about everything we did in the past, that was like, you know, unheard of to happen today, you know, things like certain forms of genocide, certain, you know, forms of like, you know, slavery and so on and so forth. That was normalized like crazy. And then today, as we evolve and we come up with like new ways of living, we look at people in the past like they were Neanderthals to be able to, you know, do things like this, like exactly. Back in previous, you know, generations, like we're talking, you know, years and years and years, eons ago, centuries, you know, men had to literally kill each other off for the right to procreate. Right. And the reason why I'm mentioning that is like, this is kind of like a civilized form of that. If you look at the fact that like these men were like saying, you have to leave, and then the women stay and we mate with them.
Yes, it's it was very, it's an interesting dynamic for sure.
So how old were these men and women getting married? What's the youngest and what's the oldest?
Well, you know, that it ranged. There was a lot of different ages. I would say on average, the average man that got married was in his mid-20s. Okay. And for the women, it was a lot younger than that. I knew some that, well, one of the reasons that their leader, Warren Jeffs, is in prison today is for marrying underage girls. I believe he married a 12-year-old.
Whoa. Hold up.
Yeah,
wait, so the leader of your religious community is now in jail for marrying a 12-year-old?
That's one of the reasons. Yes. Yep.
Wait, how did that even happen? And how did the parents were okay with this?
I have no idea. I couldn't speak for the parents, but I can say that a lot of the people out there that believe in Warren Jeffs, if he says this is how it's supposed to be, they believed him. And so did he
I don't want to get too graphic, but like, I assume he had sex with this little girl?
You know, I don't know for sure. I know there are pictures out there with him and her together, but I have no idea what went on behind closed doors. All I know is that for marrying this young girl is one of the reasons that he's in prison today.
But the reason why I'm asking about the sex part is because I imagine people in these communities are getting married to procreate partly, right?
Oh yeah, that's one of the main, I guess you could say, purposes in their life, or they would say one of my main purposes is to have children. And a lot of the women have a lot of children. My mother, for example, has 12. There's 12 of us children. So
your mom has 12 children, but how many mothers were in your household?
There were 4.
There were 4 mothers. So how many kids altogether?
Well, of my biological siblings, there were 35 of us.
35. Wait. You had 35 siblings.
Yep.
How many? Wait, hold on. Was this all from one father?
Yes. And then the fourth wife, she came in after she had already had her children. She was, I guess, after her husband had passed away, she had already had all of her children. They were already adults. So I'm not including the 4th mother's children in this number.
How many did she have?
I believe she had 11.
She had 11 kids. So really, you could be looking at the realms of 46 kids in the family unit, right?
If they were all together at one time, exactly.
And then
not including the extended family, of course.
No, of course. But like, how big are these homes?
Well, some of them are very, very large. I mean, and they're set up in almost like a hotel in the sense, or a motel, I guess you could say, in the sense that, no, I guess hotel, because all of them were all the rooms were inside. But some of the halls were just lined with door after door after door with bedrooms, and and there were multiple kitchens in the home and multiple family rooms, and so they're very large, but not everybody had a large home. Some of them were smaller, but for the families that had very large families, there were large, very big homes out there.
So growing up in this religious polygamous environment where a lot of these men were having multiple wives, how many people were in this community altogether?
Well, everyone in that religion or a part of the church weren't always in the same community. But I would say in the community of the Hilldale, Utah, and Colorado City, Arizona, there were probably about 15,000 at one point. And beyond that, there was a group up in Canada, a group in Texas, and a group in Colorado. So they were kind of spread out a little bit, but the bulk of everyone was there.
So let me ask you, the reason why I'm asking that, 15,000 is not a lot of people.
Correct.
It's not a lot of people. And for a single man to have that many wives and that many children, what are the possibilities that the men were marrying into like a distant cousin?
Very likely.
Hold
very,
on.
Very likely, actually.
When you say likely, are you talking about like direct lineage, like a man would be marrying a cousin or a cousin of a cousin? What are we talking about?
I couldn't say exactly. I do know of people personally, though, that were related. They would admit that they were cousins, but I don't know if it was direct, first cousin, or exactly where they fit into the whole family dynamic. The family dynamic is hard to keep track of out there because there is a lot of families that have mingled and have married within the family and that type of thing. So it's hard to say. I don't know exactly on, for example, I couldn't say who out there was the most related marriage. I couldn't say who that was, but I know there were several that were married to cousins.
That is crazy. Yeah. My brain's on fire just thinking about this thing. Because there's just so many angles to discuss this. So you grew up in that community and that was your normalcy for quite some time, right?
Oh, yeah.
But there had to have been some benefits in your mind having that type of setup. No?
Well, first off, it's all I knew. That's what I was raised with. So it's all I knew. But, it was a really tight-knit community, a lot of good family activities and things that we had, and community activities as a family growing up with so many siblings in the home. It was a great time for us kids growing up, as we had there were so many people to, I guess, play with and grow up with. So it was really, I would say, really good. And they did focus a lot on the importance of family. Obviously now things have changed and the families have been split up because of their leader doing crazy things. But when I was a kid out there, things were really close and really, really good, I would say.
So what was some of the cons?
Well, obviously some of the cons were not every woman was happy.
Were they mistreated?
Well, some of them were, yes.
Mistreated in what sense? How are women mistreated in a polygamous religious community?
Well, in my own home, they were not. So this isn't something that I witnessed personally, as far as physical or sexual abuse, any of that type of thing, I didn't see personally. But I will say that it was, even within my own family, there were some of the mothers that were very unhappy when another mother was brought into the family, because then that new mother would also get the husband's attention. And anyway, so you can imagine, as human beings, jealousy is a normal thing. And so even though they were raised that way, they still couldn't get past being jealous at times.
Yeah.
So I guess that would be a form of abuse, I guess you could say, but they were agreeing to it because that's all they knew. That's the way they were raised, and that's what they thought was the best way to live. So, I guess that would be a form of abuse, I guess you could say, but they were agreeing to it because that's all they knew. That's the way they were raised, and that's what they thought was the best way to live. So, I guess that would be a form of abuse, I guess you could say, but they were agreeing to it because that's all they knew. That's the way they were raised, and that's what they thought was the best way to live. So But aside from that, I have heard of other families where there was the sexual and there was the physical abuse and things like that. But I don't want to get into that too much because I didn't witness that with my own eyes. So I don't want to spread things that I don't know for sure.
Listen, I appreciate your angle on it. I'm just curious because given the amount of people that are involved in one household and they're all basically fighting for the same resources, for the lack of better words, right? So who's paying for all these kids and wives? Is it just the one man? Well, are all these wives working? Like, what's going on?
So the men work, of course. Some of the wives work, not all of them. Of course, there's a lot of children in the home, so someone's got to be there to help take care of the children, right? So most of the mothers were stay-at-home mothers, but you have to realize too that, for example, take my family. Yeah. By the time I was born, I had brothers that were old enough to be my father.
Got it.
So, of course, they were out working as well, bringing in money to help take care of the family. So there were a lot of members of the family helping out. So as the family grew, more people were bringing in money. So that's kind of how that worked. And a lot of us out there worked in construction in some sense. And so we would even leave the community to do work, whether it was, I guess you name it, every kind of construction. We had people out there that knew how to do it.
So was construction like the main type of skill set in the?
I would say so. I would say so, yes.
So, okay. So if you were going out into the world to work and to earn money, you encountered people outside the community, right?
Correct.
So what was that like? Were you like criticized for the type of lifestyle you had as a person who was growing up in a polygamous community?
Yeah, well, I don't know for sure what people were thinking. Of course, we stood out by the way we dressed and by the way that we just were as human beings. We had a different lifestyle, so we would stand out. And, today even you can see some of these women and guys from out there that dress a certain way and they stand out if you see them in Walmart, for example. So of course we would get double glances when someone saw us just because we were different. But at the same time, we were in a sense taught to not mingle or communicate too much with these so-called outsiders. So we thought we had it all. I mean, I'll tell you, as a young boy, I thought I had it all. Yeah, I was sad for everyone else in the world because they were the unfortunate people that didn't have all of the blessings that I was born into, as I was told, right?
Right.
So we would go out there and do our work and just we would mingle with the people we had to get the work and the jobs done. Okay. But outside of that, we weren't out there creating friends. We weren't out there trying to get to know these people really, really well. It was just go out and do your work and come back to the community.
Yeah, but did anyone ever question your lifestyle directly?
We would have people come up to us and jokingly ask, how many wives do you have? And things like that. And of course, being the young boy that I like to joke around. So I would always tell them that I had 30 wives just for the fun of it. I wasn't married at the time, but I just went along with it, of course. So anyway, it didn't bother me at all. People would come up and ask those type of questions, but I would say the majority of people we came across, they were very respectful of our beliefs, based on what I saw.
I'm just trying to imagine, like, if you're growing up in a community that tells you that everyone is pretty much evil and everything we're doing in our tight-knit group of people, which in reality is the outlier of how everybody else lives, given the population size compared to the rest of the world. When you leave to like go to work or get money or whatever the case may be, what happens in situations where, let's say, a man leaves and he goes to work and he, I don't know, finds a worldly woman, right? That's flirting with him, or he's flirting with her, and things happen. What are there consequences, or is that expected?
Well, if you get caught, there are definite consequences, and it depends. It depends on if they hooked up and, let's say, slept together or something like that. That man will be forced out of the community. That will be his consequence.
He will not.
That doing something like that would be considered one of the greatest sins you could possibly commit.
Really?
So if you did that, you're out. Period. So that's one of the reasons that the man would be afraid to do that, because they knew that if that were to happen, they would, and someone found out, of course, they would be asked to leave or forced to leave the community. So I will say, though, that meeting, for example, I'll speak for myself. In fact, one of the reasons I decided to move out of the community is because I met a wonderful family outside of the community. I met a wonderful girl, and I would talk with this family and get to know them a little bit. And when I realized that I had been, in a sense, lied to, because I was told that everyone outside of our belief couldn't possibly be happy because they didn't have all of the truth. And when I met some of these people and realized how good they were, how happy they were, how happy their family was, it made me start to think, what, and this was about 17 years old, going on 18, is when I really started to question maybe what I've been told my entire life isn't entirely true. And so that's one of the reasons I chose to leave the community behind. Yeah.
So, I mean, throughout this whole conversation, you were talking about it in the past tense. So you left the community.
At age 18, I moved out, correct.
So at age 18, you move out. Was it like a gradual understanding that you had to move out, or was it instantaneous? You were lied to and you packed your bags and you were just scurrying off. What happened?
So it was not thought out, not a well thought out plan at all. In fact, when I moved out, I decided, I was with one of my brothers, and I decided, just literally, we went to work one day. We were out visiting with some members of this family I told you about that we met outside of the community.
Visiting? Like visiting in what sense?
Just talking.
I thought you weren't allowed to really commingle.
Well, that's the thing. When I realized that these people out here were good people, I stopped caring so much about the rules.
But you said you were with your brothers. So were your brothers also commingling?
So it was one of my brothers. Yeah. Well, there were actually several of us at the time we went to work. I guess, let's see, there were four of us brothers, and all four of us were, again, we went to dinner together, and we were, I guess, having a conversation and talking and all of that. After dinner, though, two of my brothers went home, leaving just two of us behind. And I guess you could say that myself and the other brother that stayed behind were the rebellious ones.
Yeah, I can just like, we'll catch up.
Exactly. They're the rule breakers. So we stayed behind. God. We wanted to continue on the conversation and then see what happened. And it actually, our conversation just led on for hours, and we were just talking, and we were just having such a great time in conversation. And it got to the point where it was, I believe, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning. And we realized, and of course, we were starting to get phone calls from our parents, wondering where in the world.
I'm shocked they allowed you to use phones. I mean, didn't those things have internet?
No internet, but phones, yes. We were never allowed to have the internet, but we were allowed to have cell phones for calling and texting.
What year was this?
So this was before smartphone. This was before every smartphone had the internet. This was in 2008.
So in 2008, I mean, that's not that long ago, because like there were phones with internet access, right? But like in 2008, you didn't have like nobody in the community had internet.
No, well, some of the businesses in the community were allowed to, but in the homes and on a personal device, no one was allowed to have internet at all. Period.
So what about now?
That's still the same. That's the same. People have fancier phones, but they're not allowed to have internet on them.
Can you do that?
So that
can you get phone service without internet? Is that a thing?
I guess so. I don't know if you have to turn it off manually on the phone, or if you have to ask the internet service or the phone provider to turn it off for you. I'm not sure how that works. I've never tried to get a phone and not have the internet on it now.
Let me tell you something. If they got to manually do it, there's a lot of people breaking those rules. Okay, like like listen, there's somebody over there with a TikTok account. All right, like I'm just telling you. Wait, okay, so
I've heard that some of the people still in the community have watched some of my YouTube channel, that my wife and I do. So obviously, some of them are breaking the rules a little bit here and there.
So how many people left after you? Like, were you the last of the Mohicans, or were
Well, no. I guess you could say my brother and I started a trend. As far as it seems like a lot of people left after us. In fact, now I believe there are 15 of us siblings that have moved out.
Oh, wow.
Of the community, and the rest are still there. My parents are still there as well, but I've had a lot of siblings that have moved out since I did.
So you and the siblings that moved out, which 15 siblings is already a lot, but it's only a fraction of your 46 siblings, okay? But how many of your siblings that are still in the community, as well as your parents, do you still stay in touch with?
I'm not allowed to stay in touch with people that are still in the community. So
wait, what do you mean?
That's the rule. That's the difficult, or one of the most difficult parts about leaving the community is if you do decide to leave or move out, you're not allowed to go back and mingle with your family and be a part of family reunions or events or that type of thing. You're in a way shunned, I guess you could say. I know that's a harsh word, but you're not really allowed to be a part of the family anymore.
Really?
Yeah. Well, and the reason, I'll give you the reason for that, you may want to know, is they believe that if you decide, because you grow up in this bubble where you only say or see what they want you to. So if you decide to leave and you get all of this influence from the outside world, they don't want you to be allowed to bring that back to the community to influence those that are still there.
Isn't that convenient?
So exactly. How dare you come back and say, actually, it's not that bad out here. Yeah, they don't want that, right? So anyway,
that's
a big part of it.
So when you left, you were not allowed to communicate with your family members, but like, what about your parents?
Yeah, so I am for a while. When I first moved out, I was allowed to speak with my parents to some degree. Not a lot, but a little bit here and there. And as time went on, Warren Jeffs, after being put into prison, he started coming up with a lot of really crazy rules. Yes, he still is in charge of the community and is, in a sense, running the community from his prison cell.
What? How?
So, well, he has visitors that go in and talk with him, and they relay his messages. At times, he's been able to call out from prison, and they would put the call on speakerphone in a meeting for all of the members to hear, and they would listen in, and he would give them a sermon or preach a sermon and kind of communicate that way. But yeah,
how was he able to do that, knowing that he went to jail for whatever it is that he did in the community that was wrong to the outside world? Because you're still in the United States. There's still laws within the United States. Like, you can't marry a 12-year-old. Like, that's a law. So when he was punished for it, going to jail, how did the community feel about taking orders from someone that is now incarcerated?
Well, that's the thing. They don't believe he did anything wrong. And he denies that he did anything wrong. And you brought up the laws of the country, right? So you're correct. There are laws of the country, but they are taught and they believe that they should abide by the laws of the country as long as they don't contradict with the laws of God. And he says that God was commanding these things. So if it is, they would just simply say God is above the law. Period. So if it's what God wants, it's above the law.
Are there any other laws that they're breaking that?
Well, there has been things. I mean, just polygamy in general. They're not being married legally. A lot of these marriages are just done within the church. They're not legal marriages. So that type of thing. And there have been other things that they did illegally, like taking advantage of the food stamp system. One of the leaders of the church.
What? What do you mean?
Yeah. I don't remember all the details, but they were able to, because there are so many women out there that are not legally married. They could claim food stamps because they didn't have a legal husband that was providing for them. So that's one of the ways. And another thing that as well I heard of that Well, actually, this is the one I most recently heard of, which sounds very likely. One of the leaders out there, Lyle Jeffs, I believe he's Warren's brother. He was the bishop for quite some time, and he would have everyone get on food stamps. They would go out and they would get all of the food, and they would bring it in and put it in what they called a storehouse. So basically, they would give it to the church, and then the church would decide who got the food, and they would distribute the food as they saw fit, as opposed to just letting the families have the food. So that was another big reason for the.
Wait.
Did it lose you there?
Dude, but this is literally insane.
It's like a movie for sure. It's hard to believe sometimes.
Wait. So families with that had multiple wives qualified to get food stamps from the United States government because they weren't legally married and they were not tied to any assets or any income. They got food using the food stamps, and they had to give that food to the church that decided where the food would go. So the families that brought the food weren't even likely the ones to receive the food.
Correct.
Do you understand how crazy that is?
I do. And let me be clear here. This was not going on when I was out there. When I lived there, things were very different, but
Jesus,
a lot of crazy things happened over the last 15 years. It's been absolutely crazy.
That's insane.
Yep.
Okay, so you left the community, right? You left at, I don't know, age 17, 18, right?
18. Yep. The month I turned 18, actually. Yep.
And what was the last thing you remember your family telling you when you did?
So and I was kind of leading up to this earlier on as well. The experience of leaving was not a well thought out plan at all. It was one of those things that in talking with this family that we had met, my brother and I decided on a whim that we were going to leave. We said, you know what? We're out way past our curfew. We're going to go back home. We are going to be in big trouble. And instead of going back home and dealing with all of that, what if we just left? I know. Crazy teenage boys. Trust me. Crazy. We had $20 in our wallet. We did not have a lot of money. We were not prepared for this. We just made a crazy decision out of nowhere. And so we just didn't go back that night. We just didn't go home. And, it was an entire night of our parents trying to reach us. And I can only imagine what was going through their heads. I feel for them. I do. I feel bad. But it was one of those things that we knew that if we were to answer our phone, all they would do is talk to us all night long about how we needed to return and how we had to go back. And we felt like we had made an official decision, and we wanted to stick to it and make it work. Really? And the next morning I called my mother back and kind of explained the situation, and of course she's sobbing and in tears, and all she can say is that she wants me to come back, and she knows that I know that that's the truth, and how could I possibly leave that behind and all of the blessings that come along with it. And anyway, so it was heartbreaking. It really was. And the next day we went back and gathered up some of our things from the house and spoke with our father for some time. And of course he wanted to convince us to stay as well. And when we just decided and told them, this is what we decided we wanted to do. We were both over the age of 18. There wasn't anything really they could do to force us to stay there. So
what does being 18 have to do with anything? Because that's a legal age and they don't care about the law. So what difference did that make?
Well, and I have heard, see, that was my experience. At that point, I moved out. My brother and I struggled for quite some time with the generous help of many families, especially the one that we became so close with. They became our new family because they brought us in and they helped us so much get on our 2 feet and all of that. So anyway, so it was quite the experience, but it was a long experience to kind of get on our feet and try to figure out what life was all about. But there were other families out there. That was my experience. There were a lot of families that would actually lock kids up or lock people in a room or lock people in a building to prevent them from leaving the community. So that was my experience, but there were a lot of experiences that were a lot more intense and a lot more crazy than mine was. So I have good parents, and
they would lock kids up to prevent them from leaving
I don't know.
This polygamous community.
Yeah, I mean, of course, they had to be old enough to actually want to leave. So I'm not talking about 2-year-olds, but some adults even, and some younger teenagers would actually be forced to stay in a room or forced to stay in a house and locked up with big gates and fences to prevent them from leaving. Yeah.
Whoa, so that's insane.
My family had nothing to do with that. Thank goodness. I was in a really, I would say, one of the best families out there.
So when you left, did you guys have a car?
We did. My brother that left with me, he's just older, maybe 6 months older than I am. He had a truck at the time.
He had a truck?
Uh-huh.
That seems like a stereotypical type of vehicle in that community. I'm sorry.
Everybody out there had a truck. Trust me. It's not. Yeah, it's just the truth.
It's like in Brooklyn, the Hasidic Jews, they have a lot of minivans. And
yeah, well,
I'm sure you guys had that too.
Everyone's known to having either a truck or a 15-passenger van. So
yeah.
Those were.
If you had like 46 kids, yeah, of course.
Yep, you gotta have it. Yeah,
that's crazy. Okay, so you left the community of the fundamentalist Latter-day Saints, who are notorious for having a polygamous lifestyle, multiple wives to each man, and the men that didn't have wives, in some ways they were asked to leave. However you want to look at it. Now you're into this new world, which is outside the community that you are no longer allowed to go back to or communicate with, at least, right?
Right.
How did you manage to get educated, get work, all this stuff? How did that even happen for you?
Well, that's a good question. And I'll just start off by saying a lot of sweat and tears.
Yeah.
You know, that a lot of work, but it started out with my brother and I just doing what we knew how to do. All we knew how to do was construction.
Yeah.
And so we had some connections, and we were able to go do some work for people that needed some a roof repaired or some, a house frame, that type of thing. We were in Las Vegas for some of the time. We were in northern Utah. We were all over the place trying to find work. And I'll remind you, this was in 2008, right when the recession was at its worst.
Yeah.
So it was really difficult to find work.
Slim pickings.
There were times where I was so close to returning back to back to my family and saying, "Hey, please take me back. I'll do it ever," because it was a difficult time for us. It was not an easy time to find work and have money to survive and live. So thank goodness we had a lot of really kind families that helped us out.
So is that what kept you going? The fact that you had the support of these other families?
Definitely. That was one of the main reasons that I was able to just push through. And so at that time, I mean, a lot happened between then and now. So to sum it up really quickly, though, I actually joined the mainstream LDS church shortly after.
Wait, what's the difference?
So it's the FLDS church broke off from the mainstream Mormon or mainstream LDS church. So when someone thinks of a Mormon, they typically think of the worldwide millions of members church that has temples all over the world. That's the bigger church that people think of when they say the Mormon church.
Okay.
So when I left the FLDS, they were a break-off group from the mainstream church and started their own line of prophets and all of that. But I still had the basic beliefs, like who the founder or who the first prophet was, which is Joseph Smith. I already believed in him because that's
simple name for someone who's a prophet. Joseph Smith.
Exactly. I'm surprised you haven't heard of him. Well, you'll have to do some research on
it. In my community, that just wasn't a thing. Let's just say Haitians didn't, agree with the Mormons. I don't know what you want me to say.
No, there's a lot of people that haven't heard of it. I don't blame you at all. But a lot of information there if you want to do some research. But anyway, I ended up joining the LDS church and serving what they call serving a mission in Chile. So I was there for 2 years, speaking their language, involved with the culture and preaching the word of God, I guess you could say, the teachings of the LDS church to all of the people in Chile, or at least in the area that I was serving in. So I did that for 2 years. Was able to learn Spanish, pick it up really well, and even to this day, I speak Spanish a lot. I speak it a lot. So it's been a very
español,
beneficial thing for my life. Sí, hablo español. Como los chilenos.
Hey, listen, my Spanish is just a little slim pickings here.
No, you're good. I just said I speak the Chilean Spanish, but anyway, it's been very helpful and beneficial for me. But the reason I wanted to bring all of that up is while there for 2 years, it was not easy for me. Learning a new language was one of the most difficult things I've ever done in my life.
I can imagine.
And I didn't have a lot of experience in studying and learning because I was just homeschooled growing up. Yeah. And so to take on something like that was very difficult for me. And so when I was able to conquer that, I came back from my mission and I said, I can do anything I want in this world now. I was able to do this. I can do whatever I want to do. So I was able to go and get my GED and pass that test and went right into college. And it was not easy. It was not easy. For the first couple of years, I had a very difficult time, a lot of time visiting with my professors, trying to get help, trying to understand things and the best I could. But after a couple of years, it started getting a lot easier, and I was able to graduate college with a great GPA. And so that's
good for you, man. I like that. I like that. Good for you. That's quite the adversity that, a lot of people don't even realize how hard it would be if they had to start over like that, especially when you're coming from a community that pretty much brainwashed you away from growth. You know what I mean? So, like, when you started to evolve, right, you became a man, like in a different sense, not in the the religious sense, like, because I'm pretty sure manhood started out a lot different in the fundamentalist Latter-day Saints, right? So when you became a man, did you date?
Yes, I did. So
what was that like? Dating after leaving a polygamous community to now the worldly humans who aren't fundamentally polygamists.
All the people we were told were wicked. Yeah.
Okay. So what was that like for you?
Even growing up in a community like that, you still have your natural tendencies. Like I wanted to date. I wanted to be with girls, and that as a young teenager. And so I would sometimes sneak out of my house, even while I was in that community. I would sneak out of my house and go meet up with a girl just so that we could talk. In most cases, not even hold hands, just simply to be able to talk. Really? And have that connection, I guess, because it's just such a natural thing, or it was for me anyway, to want that. So when I moved out, it was very easy for me to want to start dating again. And of course, it took some learning. It was a lot of learning curves that I had to go through and deal with, because dating was not something I was told about or had any experience with. So it took a lot of learning, but it was something I wanted to do and was able to figure it out, I guess. I mean, I'm married now, so I guess I was able to figure it out okay.
Yeah, but let's talk about that before you got to that, right? Because we're skipping a lot of steps here.
Oh, yeah.
When you were dating, right, after leaving your polygamous community, what was it like describing your past to people you started to date?
At first I was hesitant. I assumed that by telling people where I was from, they wouldn't be attracted to that. They wouldn't trust me. Yeah. They wouldn't really know what was behind all of those, I guess you could say, closed doors. And they would. So I was hesitant at first. And then there came a time, and this really was after I returned from my mission in Chile. When I returned back from there and had all those experiences, I just felt a lot more self-confident, and I didn't try to keep it from anyone. I didn't try to hide from anyone. I was very upfront. I was very open, an open book about everything. Yeah. And I think because these girls that I was taking on dates could see that I was being straightforward and honest about it, I wasn't trying to hide anything or be secretive about anything. I think that was easier for them to say, okay, well, obviously he doesn't think that way anymore. He doesn't believe that anymore. So it's not a big deal.
So what were some of the hardest things to kind of get over, even for you, given that you're now in a community that no longer resembles a community you came from, which was heavily sorted around polygamy, right? Mm-hmm. Now you're dating in a monogamous way. What was the most, I guess, either uncomfortable, confusing, or hardest thing for you to kind of navigate when you were doing that? Not just conversations, but just everything that was involved.
Well, it wasn't very difficult for me, I guess you could say. I was perfectly okay with the idea of only having one girlfriend or only having one wife. Okay. It wasn't something I struggled with at all. I was never married in the FLDS church, so I didn't have to give up any wives or anything like that. Yeah. So it wasn't it wasn't very difficult for me, you know. It was something that was a little bit difficult, though, that I had to kind of step back and reevaluate was out there in the FLDS, the men were in charge. They were the ones that made all the big decisions. They were the ones that everyone looked up to, the father of the home, and did what he said. The mothers had to obey him. Yeah. You know what I mean? So that was something where, I mean, even as a kid growing up out there, we would work on some of these construction sites, and we would be talking to the guy, the husband on the job site about what he wants. And he would say, okay, well, this sounds good, but let me go talk to the boss, you know, and his wife about what she thinks about it. And we would sometimes just start laughing like, I can't believe that he's actually going to go talk to her instead of just being a man and making his own decision here. You know what I mean? So it was definitely very different out there. But I will say that it didn't take me long to realize that I was perfectly okay with being an equal partner. And I actually was able to see in other families that I was introduced to and became a part of that equal partnership between husband and wife. And I loved it, and I wanted that myself. And so it didn't take long for me to realize this is going to be much better for me. This is what I want for my life.
So let me ask you this question. Like, because you're exiled from your polygamous family and no longer allowed to speak to them, you have kids?
I do. I have two. Yeah.
Do you get to introduce your kid to your family members that you were exiled from?
Not the ones that still follow that religion. No.
Do they know you have children?
I believe so. I don't know if they all do. I know that my parents do. I've been able to find ways to communicate that to them, but it's not one of those where I can go introduce them and say, "Hey, here's your grandma," you know. And that it's difficult, you know. It's not something that's easy for me to try to explain, because I also don't want to hide anything from my kids. Yeah. So my kids are starting, or at least one of them is getting to the age where she is starting to have questions about, you know, who's your mom? Ugh. Why haven't I met your mom? Damn. You know what I mean? And to try to explain that to a kid, it's not easy. But as she gets older, and as my son gets older as well, I'll be an open book about it and just explain it to them as they can start to understand things a little bit better. But I'm still crossing my fingers and hoping one of these days that they'll get to meet my kids and we'll be able to have that connection. But we'll see what happens.
Let me ask you another question. Same context, but different scenario, right? You are exiled from this polygamous community for multiple reasons that you described. How old are your parents?
Oh, boy. My father is 81, I believe. Wow. And my mom, I believe she is early 60s, I want to say.
So
my mom is the second wife. So she's a lot younger than my dad is.
yeah, that's quite the age gap. I imagine if they were married a lot younger. And I don't want to put a grim thought in your mind, but when family members start to pass away in that community, are you allowed to witness or be there for your family or go to a funeral since you're exiled from that community?
So I'll just give a recent experience to answer that question. One of the family members recently passed away that still follows the religion.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear
And
that.
we were allowed to go to an open casket viewing just to kind of see the individual and kind of say our goodbyes, but we were not invited to any funeral. No.
Who was it that died?
It was one of the it was my father's first wife. So we were able to go and at least say goodbye and see and be there for an open casket viewing. But that was something that was held outside of the community, which I'm very grateful that they at least were allowed us to do that. It's better than nothing at all. And but unfortunately, because the funeral was held as a church service within the community, of course they didn't allow us. Now, when my mother dies, or when my father dies, I'll probably fight a little harder to be more involved. I was just trying to be respectful for the first mom. She's not my biological mom, even though I had a very close relationship with her. I didn't want to cause an uproar or cause any problems, with anything going on. So I kind of just did what I was told to do. But when it's my biological mom or my dad that passes away, I think I'll fight a little harder to try to be there and be more involved.
So when you went to this viewing of the body, what did you see other family members there that was in the community?
A couple, but it was not very many. It was some of the older children that were kind of there overseeing the event, but it wasn't very many.
What was it like running into them again?
It was amazing. I mean, it was great to see them, and I always look forward to reunite with family and friends. And so it was one of those things that I've always, since the moment that I moved out of the community, I've always tried to be very respectful of their beliefs. I came from the same community, and I understand how they think. I understand what's important to them. And for me to try to bash on their beliefs, or for me to try to go out there and cause an uproar and force them to accept me back into the family, I know that would just cause more
harm,
difficulties, and more hatred. And I don't know, hatred is a strong word. More harm. They would look at me as they look down on me even more if I tried to do those things. And so I've just tried to be just kind of standoffish and be very respectful of their beliefs and what they consider very sacred to them. And hopefully it'll pay off one of these days. But I have noticed that because I have acted that way, some of the people that still believe and follow this religion are able to respect me and my lifestyle to some degree, which was nice to see.
That's good. I mean, it's unfortunate, but I think it's a step in the right direction, at least to some degree. For them not to have any animosity. But you mentioned that, like, because you came from that community, there's a lot of things that you still understand and respect. But my question to you is, what are some of the main takeaways that you have from being in a polygamous community, which is a fundamentalist Latter-day Saints, after leaving and also being exiled from them? What are some takeaways you have from growing up in that environment that you still value and practice today?
Oh man, I would say the importance of family time and family I guess, togetherness, of
Okay.
a lack of a better word. There was always within my family. I'll speak for my personal experience. In my family, it was always taught to do things together as a family. We would read together. We would sing together. We would pray together. We would eat together. We would go on events together. It was rarely ever one person goes off and does something by themselves. It was very much a tight-knit family unit. And I think that because we were so tight together, we were able to, go through life and look at things in a little bit more of a positive light. And so the importance of family is definitely something that I hold on to. A little bit different, though, I will say. For example, it was hard to have a super one-on-one close relationship with my father because he had so many children.
Yeah.
And, and he was always working. And so it was hard to have that time where you could just go and have that personal relationship with him.
Yeah, that's crazy.
That's something where I love the importance and the talk of family, but one of the things I do very differently is I try to be very close with my kids. I rush home from work to hold them in my arms and I try to play with them a lot and just be there as much as I possibly can for them because that's something growing up that I missed.
Yeah, I mean that's got to be, a mind-boggling transition for you because your natural understanding of fatherhood came from somebody that was very distant or unavailable. And now that you're raising your own child, is it a conscious effort or is it natural for you to be?
I would say in the beginning
attentive?
It was a conscious effort, but now it's become perfectly natural. There's nothing I would rather do in this world than hold my kids and be with them and my wife. And that's just what I look forward to every day is coming home from work and being with them. So now it's become very, very natural. Yes.
That's good. Okay.
Yeah.
Listen, this conversation's been wild. I have a couple of questions from listeners and previous guests. Okay.
Sure.
We're going to try to answer a couple of them and I'm going to play back some of those questions and you give the best answer that you can. I try to pick the questions that are somewhat fitting to the guest.
Don't give me a difficult question now, Jeff. Keep it easy for me.
I'm going to ask you the square root of 4,008. All right, here's the first question, right? And you can put this in the context of your history and your experience. Okay. Here we go. Here's the first question.
How do you go about dealing with your family and dating older men? How do you go about being like, hey, this is my boyfriend?
Oh boy.
You see why I picked that one? You see why I picked that one, right?
Yeah. Okay. So obviously, kind of focusing on where I came from and that, I guess that's the only way to go about answering this. But it's that's a good question. So I will say I saw a lot of that growing up.
Yeah.
For example, I'll just share an example. One of my full-blooded biological siblings was early teenager, and she married the prophet of the church out there, the FLDS church. And this isn't Warren Jeffs. This is Rulon Jeffs, which is Warren's father. So he was about 80 years old.
Whoa. Hold up.
Obviously a very extreme scenario here. But so I saw that happen in front of my eyes. Obviously it was unique because he was the prophet at the time. And so everyone out there respected him. So we assumed that it was this amazing privilege and opportunity that my sister had to marry into this family. I believe she was his 60th wife. And very, very unique situation. But I remember as a young boy standing up in the second floor of our home, looking out the bay windows as Rulon Jeffs pulled up. Well, he was sitting in the back seat. He had a driver in his white Lincoln town car.
Sounds about right. Sounds like something a pimp with riding. Just saying.
So pulled up into our driveway, and my sister walked out and got in the back seat with who was to be her husband, and drove off. And I remember, I think back on that now, and I was, as a young boy, I thought, man, she's the luckiest girl in the world to be able to marry this amazing man, this man of God, and all of this stuff. And that's the way I was raised, so I assumed it was okay. But of course, looking back now, I cringe, and I feel bad for my sister, and I just hope the best for her. I haven't really been able to be in contact with her much since that very day. I saw her on occasion here and there, but really, she was not around much after that.
Was your sister able to like produce children for this 80-something-year-old guy?
Not from him, but I don't want to get. It's still a difficult topic for me. I don't want to get into too much detail, but when he passed away, she was assigned to another man to be remarried. And as far as I'm aware, I haven't met any of her children, but I've heard that she at least has one child from another man.
It's like these women are getting passed around.
But that type of thing, that was an extreme. But younger women marrying older men, and in a lot of cases being the second or third or fourth wife, from where I came from, was very common. We didn't even think twice about it. And and they seemed to get along, and they were super happy in public. I have no idea what happened behind closed doors, but they seemed to be happy in public. And that's really all I can say about that.
So if someone close to you right now decided to come to you in the worldly world that you live in and said, hey, I want to introduce my parents to my older boyfriend or whatever, soon to be husband, and imagine that person is your daughter. How would you feel about that?
So just to make sure I understand clearly, so you're saying my daughter came to me, or are you saying if I was still a part of that religion? No,
right now.
Right now,
if your daughter came to you and said, not right now, but like when your daughter's of age, I imagine she's young.
Older, yes.
Yeah, when she's younger. So let's say your daughter is, let's put a number in it. Let's say your daughter's 20 years old.
Okay.
And her man is like, I don't know, in his 50s.
Okay.
What would you say to her?
Oh my goodness. See, that's where it gets complicated. It'd be one of those things that my number one priority, and I can say this already, even though she's nowhere close to 20 years old, my number one priority for her is her safety and happiness.
Okay. Fair
enough.
So
I would start off with that.
Okay.
I would have 100 and probably 1,000 questions for her about this person. And I would want to know all the details. And based on the information I was given at that time, I would be able to, give my, I guess, opinion about that. But I don't have anything wrong with if a woman wants to marry an older man and she is at least 20 years old or something, she's an adult, she can make her own decisions. I would hope that maybe they would wait until they were in their mid to late 20s, you know what I mean, to have a little bit of life lived before making that kind of decision to marry someone at that age. But I can't speak for everyone. I know that some people choose to get married younger, and that's okay. But I'm just thinking for my own daughter. I'm like, I think I would want her to live a little first before making a commitment like that, and to be able to truly make that decision based off of like an educated decision, not just I had a great time and a great feeling, and now this is what I want for my life. I would hope that she would think about it and really take everything into consideration. But like I said, I have nothing against someone marrying an older person, if that's what, and vice versa, a younger guy marrying an older woman, if that's what's going to truly make them happy and they're going to feel the most fulfilled in life, that's their decision.
But if she were to do it, what would you say would be the best way for her to approach you, for you to have confidence in her decision? What would she have to do?
To approach me.
Yes.
See, these are difficult questions to even think about since she's so young, and not anything I've ever thought about. But I would say to approach me, I would want her to have, for a lack of better word, have done the research. I would want her to actually come to me and say, hey, I know all of these things. And because of that, this is what I want. I wouldn't want her to approach me and just say that I had a great time with this guy over the weekend and I think we're meant to be together.
I mean, the weekend's a bit of a stretch, but I get you. I like the fact that you're saying that because sometimes people do feel that way. You got time for one more question?
Sure.
All right, let's do one more. I have so many questions. I got to pick the right one. Here we go. This one's a good fit for you too.
All right.
What's the biggest lesson you want to teach your future son or daughter?
That's a great question. That is a great question.
Given your experience.
Given my experience, based on where I came from, what I was allowed to do, what I was not allowed to do, and then trying to change my life and do things differently, and what I've done up to this point and what I've seen and experienced, I would say to my son or daughter, or really anyone, to just live life to the fullest. You can't sit around and wait for things to happen, good things to happen. You can't wait around for your opportunity to come. You need to go out there and make those opportunities and make life what you want it to be, instead of waiting around for it to just happen on its own.
I like that. That's good. Now the tables are turned. As part of the Introspect Club podcast, where you learn a lot about yourself through conversations with other people, let's bring other people into the conversation by you asking questions to the future.
Sure.
Yes. What are some questions you want answered?
Yeah. So a good question I think that I would love to hear answered from someone is, if you could give one piece of advice to yourself 10 years ago, what would that be?
Oh, that's deep. That's deep. I got to write that one down. I think you're thinking,
that would be one question.
Okay. What's the next one?
Go ahead.
What's the next one?
Another question would be, what do you feel that we do today as a society? What do you feel that we do today as a society better than we did 50 years ago?
Okay. I like that. What's another one? Do you have another one?
Yeah, I have one more. Let's see here. Let me see here. If I'm trying to think of how to word this. If the entire world could hear and understand you, what would you want to say to everyone?
Oh, that's how everybody feels about their own Instagram account. You can see what's going on there. That's a great question. You're very philosophical. I can appreciate that. I think people are going to have a field day with your.
Yeah, good luck answering those ones, right?
Yeah. I want to touch on the. Woman introducing older boyfriend. If I was in a parent's shoes, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think to your point, if she had done the research, that's great.
Mm-hmm.
I think for me, if I had a daughter that introduced me to a much older man as her soon-to-be husband or boyfriend or whichever, I too would like to know that she did her own research. That applies to not just an older man, that's just man in general, right?
In general, great.
But a part of me, that's just my ego or whatever, a part of me would feel like there was something that I did as a parent that stimulated her desire to be in that kind of relationship. Okay. Yeah, and this might be my ego talking or selfishness saying that, I'm the center of her universe. But in reality, a part of me feels like a lot of how women approach their relationships outside of like getting therapy and doing a lot of self-work, but how they naturally move towards other men is a reflection of their relationship with their own father or lack thereof.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? So I think that would be the first thing I would look at. And then if that situation came about, I would almost require me to, for lack of a better word, from dad to her boyfriend, to male date her boyfriend for a series of outings, mano y mano, to really understand, because this is my daughter, I need to understand who she is going to be in the presence of for the remainder of her life, if that's the choice, right? I would want to have more conversations with him. We'd be playing some golf. We probably would belong to the same country club if we're the same age. You know what I mean? Things like that. I wouldn't initially be happy about it, but I need to get to know the man. Mm-hmm. Even more so. And I think that's something fathers should do even regardless of age, but it's even more important when you're seeing something like that where there's so much disparity between age. There becomes some tricky things that happen there. Anyway, that would be my take on there.
Yeah. No, that's a good take. And it's one of those things that you hope as a parent that you raise your kids well enough to make good decisions. And my goal and my hope is that I can just raise my kids to be able to fully trust them and know that when they are making a decision, that they are making a decision because I've raised them to do so. So that's my hope. But yeah, that's a deep, interesting question.
Well, I'm glad you were able to answer it, and you asked even more deep questions, and I want to see how those get answered. That's the whole loop of this whole podcast. I kind of want to see what the next person is going to say and what their questions are going to be and keep this conversation going. I want to create more enlightened people and also introspective people. Yeah. That's the reason I have these conversations. But how do people find you if they want to connect with you, learn more about your story, or just like be able to, I don't know, get more inspirations from your life?
Yeah, so my wife and I have a YouTube channel we've been doing for about a year and a half, and it's called Growing Up in Polygamy. That's my YouTube channel, our YouTube channel, and that would be the easiest way to find us. You can also find us on Instagram, also under Growing Up in Polygamy.
That's what's up. All right. My name is Jeff Damisse. You can find me at j.damisse for IG as well as Clubhouse and other platforms. J_DAMISSE for Twitter. You can find the Introspect Club at Introspect_Club. That's for everything that's IG, Patreon, YouTube, you name it. If you have any questions that you want me to ask future guests, please DM me. And if you are a unique individual that had a very interesting life or very unique experience that other people can learn from, reach out to me. I might be able to get you on the show. Make sure you guys like and subscribe, comment, hit us up in the DMs. Make sure you guys share. That's how we spread the message. Sam, fascinating conversation. I thoroughly enjoy and appreciate you participating in it.
Of course. Thanks for having me. I had a blast. Appreciate you having me on.
Until next time, man.
We'll see you next time.